Hey there! Today we are going to start something that is completely different, because today we're going to start the Inkcyclopedia. Now, the Inkcyclopedia is a series of videos in which I want to cover specific inks as in-depth as I can. What's very important with that, I'm going to explain to you how we're going to do that, but first of all I want to point out that we need your input on that. We have devised a number of tests for inks. Maybe test is a large word, but at least some demonstrations. But if there's anything you need to see, you want me to do, then you have to let us know. So post comments, send emails, etc. Okay, so what is this Inkcyclopedia going to be like? Well, these are going to be videos which will be uploaded. You can access them from fpgeeks.com. And you can just watch them, but in addition to being a series of videos, there will also be still shots. So I will do writing samples, and there will be high-resolution photographs of these writing samples, and they will be uploaded on the same page from which you access the video. The use of that is that you can download the samples, check them out in high resolution, but also check them out while I'm talking, because I have a camera, I'm recording video as I write, but some details are very difficult to pick up in video. So if you have a still, you can just have it, next to my video and just check out and see what I'm doing and what it looks like. Okay, so what kind of tests are we talking about? Well, first of all, let's discuss the pens. I will use 5 different pens for these videos, and I will go through them one by one right now. First of all, we have a nudeless flex pen. I use that for 2 reasons. First of all, it flexes, which is nice because flexing gives you a fairly broad line and gives you an idea of the color of an ink, I think, and the shading too. But when not flexed, this is a fairly fine nib, so it gives you an idea of what a given ink would look like in a fine nib. Then we move on to a medium nib. I have a lot of broad nibs, but I don't actually have that many mediums, so I had to give this some thought, and I came up with this pen, the Monteverde Artista Crystal. The reason I like that pen is that it is fairly wet. So you have to bear that in mind, but because it is wet, I think it will also give you a good idea of the ink. It's not dry. Also, I think it's a somewhat juicy medium, but it's not extremely broad or anything. So I think this is a fairly representative medium nib. Then we have the Lamy Safari, a very common pen. A lot of people have this, which is one of the reasons I chose this. I happen to have a broad nib on there, so that should cover fine, medium, and broad nibs. Then I will use this pen, which is not so common, but it is the Italics Parsons Essential. The reason I use this is that it has a very smooth italic nib. For those of you who are not sure what that is, an italic nib is pretty much a round nib, except that it's flat, so it's no longer round, it's flattened at one end. And the good thing about that is that it gives you a broader line on the downstrokes, which is useful because, again, that will give you a nice overview of the ink. And I think, generally speaking, an italic nib can really bring out the shading of an ink very well. And then there is one other nib I will use. Now, a lot of people, when they are testing inks, I'm just grabbing something here, what they will do is they will use a cotton swab. Now, I think that's a very interesting thing to do, because it will give you an idea of an ink's color. However, the problem with a swab is that it's a very typical material, right? This is cotton on a plastic stick. So, if you think about a fountain pen, and you think about a cotton swab, there's a bit of a difference there. This will be softer, This will be much more absorbent. All kinds of things I can think of that make it not exactly ideal to use this for doing a sample. So we came up with something else, and when I say we, I actually mean Eric and myself. The plakat nib. This is a huge calligraphy nib, which is 15 millimeters wide. That's right, that's 1.5 centimeters. So this is a very large nib, but it is a nib. And unlike the swab, I mean, fountain pen nib, what resembles a nib more? This or this? Nothing wrong with the swab test, but I think we can do better. We can do something that's a bit more realistic. So, that's what we'll do. Okay, we've covered the pens. What about the tests? Well, there's a few things I want to do during every test. I don't want to take these videos to the extreme and make them last half an hour or something. But again, any tests that are not in here and that you would like to see, just let us know. I mean, this is a feature for you, to give you an idea of what specific ink will look like. So anything you need, tell us and we'll see if we can incorporate that. Now the tests we've come up with so far is, first of all, I will write the quick brown fox, etc. Not etc, but you know what I mean. With all of the pens except for the plakat. So this really wide nib, I'm not going to do any writing samples with that because that would be ridiculous. But I start with fine, then move my way up to broad, and then do the italic nib. This should give you an idea of the ink, and you will probably see that as the width of the nib increases, you start to get a better feel of the color of the ink, maybe a little bit more of the shading. And then we will have the italic nib, which should really give you an idea of the shading. Then I do a few words in flex writing. I'm not a copperplate master. My copperplate is poor. It's not even real copperplate. It's just screwing around a bit, but it will be with a flex nib. And that should give you an idea of the color and probably the shading of an ink fairly well, I think. Having done that, I want to check out two things. I want to check out drying time and I want to check out waterproofness. So I will write, I do a bit of writing, and I'll wait for a bit. I'll just keep talking and I'll try to wipe bits of that writing just to, you know, give us an idea of how quickly the ink dries. Now all of these inks will not be new to me, so I will have a fairly good idea of an ink's drying time, but just to give you an idea. Then once that sample is completely dry, I will put on a few drops of water and I'll leave them there for a short while. At some point I'll take a cloth and I will just get rid of the water and we'll see what remains of the writing. So that will be, this will be applied to dried writing, right? So it's not going to be wet ink, it's dried writing. Then I'll do the plakat thing. Now if you have no idea what that would look like, here's a sort of sneak preview. You see these huge lines? Well, that was it. That was the plakat. That's a huge friggin' nib. And I think that will give you a very good idea of the coloring and the extreme shading of a given ink. So what I'll do is I'll make one pass, and then I still have to figure this out a little bit because this of course draws an extremely wet line. What I want to do is do one pass, then a second pass, and a third pass. So you'll have one line and it will be covered with one swipe, 2 and 3 swipes. I'm not sure how well that's going to work out, but we'll have to see this, and maybe I'll come up with something else, or you will come up with something else, etc. Having done that, I will do another writing sample. I will just write a bit more with fine, medium, broad, and italic to give you an idea of maybe go a bit slow or something to really try and bring out the ink in different ways. So what I try to do there is use different scripts. There's not going to be calligraphy of any kind, but just to change the way I write a bit so that you get different feels for different ways of writing. And that's pretty much it. So that will be about one A4 roughly letter size bit of paper filled with ink in different ways. you can watch me do it. You can download the stills. If you don't have time for the video, you just download the stills. I don't mind, whatever works for you. I hope this is going to be useful. I think I currently own more than 80 inks. I want to cover them all, so this is going to be a big and ambitious project. But you know, anything to help you pick between inks. And that's all there's to it. So that's going to be the Inkcyclopedia. I hope it's going to be useful. And that's it. So, bye-bye.